Beth Sullivan's face burned with embarrassment as she glanced at her watch for the 10th time in 5 minutes. 47 minutes late. Not fashionably late, disrespectfully late. She drummed her fingers on the restaurant table, wondering why she'd even agreed to this blind date in the first place. "Would you like another glass of wine while you wait?" the server asked with a sympathetic smile. Beth sighed. "You know what? Yes, absolutely." As her second glass of Pinot Noir arrived, so did a text message. "Sorry, something came up. Rain check. No explanation. No real apology." Just another dating disaster to add to her growing collection. Beth tossed her phone into her purse and took a long sip of wine. She dressed up, put on makeup, and spent nearly an hour commuting to this upscale restaurant, all for nothing. "Check, please," she called to the server, who nodded with understanding. After paying for her 2 glasses of wine, Beth headed toward the exit, her heels clicking against the polished floor. She paused at the bar, suddenly reluctant to head home to her empty apartment just yet. At least the bar had a decent crowd for a Wednesday night, enough people to make it lively, but not so many that it was uncomfortable. She slid onto a stool, set her purse on the counter, and looked up to find the bartender watching her with a friendly smile. "Rough night?" he asked, sliding a cocktail napkin in front of her. "You have no idea," Beth replied. "I'll have a dirty martini, please." As the bartender prepared her drink, Beth felt someone sit down on the stool next to her. She glanced over at a tall man in a well-fitted dark gray suit. He had just loosened his tie and rolled up his sleeves, revealing strong forearms. He looked tired, but in a composed way that suggested he'd had a long but productive day. "Scotch neat," he said to the bartender. His voice was deep and pleasant. He ran a hand through his dark hair, slightly disheveled but somehow still looking perfect. Beth's martini arrived, and she took a grateful sip. The man beside her received his scotch, and they both sat in silence for a moment, each lost in their own thoughts. Long day. Beth finally asked, mostly to be polite. He turned to look at her, revealing striking blue eyes. "You could say that. Seems like yours wasn't much better." There was something comforting about talking to a stranger, someone who had no connection to her life, someone she'd likely never see again. Before she knew it, Beth found herself venting. "I just got stood up by a blind date who was apparently too important to show up on time or at all." She swirled her martini. 47 minutes, that's how long I waited before he texted to cancel. Didn't even call." The man grimaced. "Ouch." "I know, right? My friend Jenna swore he was such a catch, works in finance, loves dogs, has all his hair." Beth laughed despite herself. "The bar is literally on the floor at this point." The man chuckled, a warm sound that somehow made Beth feel better about her evening. What was the excuse? He asked. Something came up. Beth made air quotes with her fingers. "Very original." The man shook his head. "Inexcusable. If you make plans with someone, you honor them, or at the very least, you call with a genuine apology if something truly urgent happens." "Exactly. It's basic respect." Beth took another sip of her martini. "I'm Beth, by the way. Beth Sullivan. Connor Nash." He extended his hand and Beth shook it, noticing how warm and firm his grip was. "So, Connor, what brings you to a hotel bar on a Wednesday night?" Beth asked, realizing she was actually enjoying this conversation more than she would have enjoyed her date. "Just wrapped up a series of meetings. I'm staying here for the night before heading back tomorrow." He gestured to his slightly rumpled appearance. "Been a long day of people telling me what they think I want to hear rather than what I need to hear." Beth laughed. "Sounds like we both could use some honesty tonight. I'll drink to that." He raised his glass and she clinked her martini against it. "So what do you do, Connor?" Beth asked, genuinely curious about this stranger who had become her impromptu confidant. Connor hesitated for a moment. "I run a company." His answer was vague, and Beth noticed how he seemed to carefully choose his words. "What kind of company?" "Maritime logistics," he replied. "Ships, containers, ports. Not exactly exciting dinner conversation." Beth raised an eyebrow. "Try me, I'm a freelance translator. I spend my days converting technical manuals and business contracts from French and Spanish into English. I can handle a little shipping talk." Connor's face lit up with genuine interest. "A translator? Now that's impressive. How many languages do you speak?" "Fluently. 3. I can get by in Italian and Portuguese too." "That's remarkable," Connor said, and Beth felt a warm glow at the sincerity in his voice. They fell into an easy conversation, jumping from topic to topic. Connor asked thoughtful questions about her work, seeming genuinely fascinated by the challenges of translation. Beth found herself drawn to his intelligence and the way he truly listened when she spoke. An hour passed, then two. Beth couldn't remember the last time she'd enjoyed a conversation this much. Connor was different from the men she usually met. There was a quiet confidence about him, but it wasn't arrogance. He was funny without trying too hard, intelligent without being condescending. "So tell me more about this blind date," Connor said as they ordered their third round. "What was he like? Or what was he supposed to be like?" Beth groaned. "Oh God, where do I even start? According to my friend, he's this hotshot investment banker who works insane hours but makes crazy money. Apparently, that's supposed to make up for the fact that he can't be bothered to show up for a dinner he agreed to." Connor nodded, listening intently. "And you know what really bugs me," Beth continued. "The entitlement of it all, like his time is somehow more valuable than mine. I run my own business too. I have deadlines, I have clients, but I still respect other people enough to honor my commitments." "You absolutely deserve that respect," Connor agreed. "What does your translation business focus on?" "I specialize in maritime and international trade documents, actually," Beth said with a small laugh. "Ships, containers, ports, so maybe not so different from your world after all." Connor's eyes widened with genuine surprise. "No kidding, that's quite a coincidence. Small world, right?" "I actually love it, though. There's something fascinating about being the bridge between different worlds, making sure nothing gets lost in translation." Beth paused, suddenly self-conscious. "Sorry, I tend to get passionate about my work." "Don't apologize for that," Connor said firmly. "Passion is rare and valuable." Their eyes met, and Beth felt a flutter in her stomach that had nothing to do with the martinis. There was an intensity to Connor's gaze that made her feel both seen and slightly breathless. The bartender approached them. "Last call, folks. We're closing up in 20 minutes. Beth glanced at her watch in shock. "It's nearly midnight. How did that happen?" Connor looked equally surprised. "Time flies when you're—" He paused, his eyes still on hers, in good company. As they settled their tabs, Connor insisting on paying despite Beth's protests, a comfortable silence fell between them. "How are you getting home?" Connor asked as they walked toward the hotel lobby. "I was going to call a rideshare," Beth said, pulling out her phone. Connor nodded. "Do you mind if I wait with you? I'd feel better knowing you got off safely." It was a small gesture, but it touched Beth. They stood outside in the cool night air, their conversation continuing effortlessly. When Beth's ride arrived, she felt a surprising reluctance to leave. This was unexpectedly nice, she said, looking up at Connor. "It was," he agreed, his expression warm but unreadable. Beth hesitated, then pulled out a business card from her purse. "If you ever need a translator for your maritime logistics company." She offered it to him with a smile. Connor took the card, his fingers brushing against hers. "I just might," he said softly. As Beth's car pulled away, she found herself looking back at Connor's tall figure standing outside the hotel, watching her leave. She couldn't help but smile. Maybe tonight hadn't been a disaster after all. The next morning, Beth woke to a text from an unknown number. "Thank you for saving my evening. I enjoyed our conversation more than any business meeting I've had in years. Would it be too forward to ask if you'd like to have dinner sometime?" Connor. Beth smiled at her phone, typing back, "Not too forward at all. I'd like that." Their first official date was set for Friday evening. Connor had suggested a small but highly regarded seafood restaurant near the harbor, which happened to be one of Beth's favorites. As she walked in, she spotted him immediately, sitting at a corner table overlooking the water. He stood when he saw her, his smile genuine and warm. "You look beautiful," he said as she approached. Beth felt herself blush. She'd spent more time than she cared to admit choosing her outfit, a deep blue dress that brought out the highlights in her chestnut hair. "You clean up pretty well yourself," she replied, noting how handsome he looked in his tailored navy suit. As they settled in, Beth felt none of the awkwardness that usually accompanied first dates. Perhaps it was because they'd already broken the ice at the bar, Or perhaps it was something about Connor himself, the way he put her at ease with his attentive listening and thoughtful questions. "So," Beth said after they'd ordered, "tell me more about this maritime logistics company of yours. You were pretty vague the other night." Connor took a sip of his wine. "It's called Oceanic Transit. We manage shipping routes and cargo distribution across the Pacific." "Sounds substantial," Beth said, noticing how he still seemed to downplay it. "How long have you been with them?" "About 12 years now. Started right out of business school." Beth nodded, impressed but also sensing there was more to the story. "And you just happened to be in town for meetings." "Actually, we're expanding our operations to include this port. It's been a lengthy process, lots of negotiations, environmental impact studies, community outreach." Throughout dinner, Beth noticed that Connor spoke passionately about his work but kept steering the conversation back to her. He asked about her most challenging translations, her travels, her views on everything from literature to climate policy. As they shared dessert, a decadent chocolate soufflé, Beth felt herself growing increasingly attracted to Connor. It wasn't just his obvious physical appeal or the way his blue eyes crinkled when he laughed. It was how present he was, how genuinely interested in her thoughts and experiences. After dinner, they walked along the harbor, the evening air crisp but pleasant. "I have a confession to make," Connor said suddenly, stopping to face her. His expression was serious now, almost nervous. Beth's stomach tightened. Here it comes, she thought. The revelation that he was married or moving away or had some other deal-breaking secret. "I wasn't completely honest about my position at Oceanic Transit," he said. "I'm not just an employee there." Beth waited, her expression carefully neutral. "I founded the company. I'm the CEO." Of all the confessions she'd been bracing for, this wasn't one of them. "You're the CEO." "As in, the boss of everyone," Connor nodded, looking slightly uncomfortable. "Yes. I usually don't mention it right away because it tends to change how people interact with me. They either want something or they put on some kind of performance they think will impress me." Beth thought back to their conversation at the bar, how freely she'd complained about entitled businessmen who thought their time was more valuable than others. "So when I was ranting about my date, I was enjoying your honesty," Connor finished for her. "You had no idea who I was and you spoke your mind. Do you know how refreshing that is?" Beth laughed softly. "I'm glad my dating disaster provided entertainment." "That's not what I meant," Connor said, his voice gentle. "I meant that meeting you, talking with you, was the most genuine interaction I've had with someone new in a long time." Beth studied his face, looking for any sign of insincerity but finding none. "Why tell me now?" "Because I like you," he said simply. "And I want to start this, whatever this might become, with honesty." Beth felt a warmth spreading through her chest. "I appreciate that, and for what it's worth, I like you too, CEO or not." Connor's smile was like the sunrise. "Good, because I'd really like to see you again." "I'd like that too," Beth replied, realizing she meant it more than she'd expected to. As they continued their walk, Connor's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining naturally. Beth couldn't help but think how strange life could be sometimes. If her blind date had actually shown up, she would never have met Connor at all. Over the next few weeks, Beth and Connor saw each other as often as their schedules allowed. Connor, it turned out, lived primarily in Seattle but was spending more time in Beth City as his company expanded operations there. They talked daily when apart, their conversations flowing easily whether they were discussing world events, sharing childhood stories, or simply recounting their days. Beth was surprised by how comfortable she felt with Connor. Despite his success and status, which became increasingly apparent as she learned more about his company, he remained down to earth and genuinely interested in her work and opinions. A month into their relationship, Connor invited Beth to accompany him to a charity gala his company was sponsoring. "Fair warning," he said as they drove to the venue, "these events can be pretty stuffy. Lots of people trying to network and make business connections." Beth smoothed her emerald evening gown, a splurge she'd justified as a business investment. "I'll try not to fall asleep during the speeches." Connor laughed, reaching over to squeeze her hand. "Just stay close to me, you'll be my lifeline." The moment they entered the grand ballroom, Beth realized that pretty stuffy had been an understatement. The room was filled with the city's elite business leaders, politicians, old money families all dressed in their finest and engaged in what looked like carefully orchestrated social interactions. Connor was immediately approached by various people, all eager to speak with the CEO of Oceanic Transit. Beth observed how he handled each conversation with grace and attentiveness, never dismissing anyone even when it was clear they were angling for something. Mr. Nash, a silver-haired man in an expensive suit, approached them. "Wonderful event. Your company's commitment to environmental sustainability is commendable." "Thank you, Senator Williams. Have you met Beth Sullivan?" Connor placed his hand gently on the small of her back as he made the introduction. The senator turned to Beth with polite interest. "A pleasure." "And what do you do, Miss Sullivan?" "I'm a translator specializing in maritime and international trade documentation," Beth replied. The senator's eyebrows rose slightly. "How fascinating. That must be how you and Connor connected." Before Beth could respond, Connor interjected, "Actually, we met because I was lucky enough to be in the right place at the right time." Beth's expertise in languages is impressive. She's currently working on a major contract for the International Maritime Organization. Beth felt a rush of warmth at how Connor highlighted her professional accomplishments. Throughout the evening, he continued to do this, seamlessly introducing her to his business associates and industry peers in a way that emphasized her own career rather than just her connection to him. Later, as they slow danced to the live orchestra, Beth rested her head against Connor's shoulder. "Thank you," she murmured. "For what? For making me feel like I belong here, for treating me like an equal." Connor pulled back slightly to look into her eyes. "You are my equal, Beth. Your work is just as important as mine, maybe more so. I move goods from one place to another. You bridge cultures and ensure understanding between different worlds." Beth felt something shift inside her, a deepening of what she'd been feeling for Connor over these past weeks. It wasn't just attraction or compatibility, it was something more profound. As the evening wound down and they waited for the valet to bring Connor's car, they stood close together in the cool night air. Connor wrapped his jacket around Beth's shoulders. "There's something I've been meaning to tell you," he said, his expression suddenly serious. "That sounds ominous," Beth replied, trying to keep her tone light despite the sudden flutter of anxiety in her stomach. Connor took both her hands in his. "I'm falling in love with you, Beth Sullivan." The world seemed to pause for a moment as Beth absorbed his words. They'd only known each other for a little over a month, but it felt like so much longer. There had been an instant connection between them, a sense of recognition that had only grown stronger with time. "I know it might seem fast," Connor continued when Beth didn't immediately respond. "And I don't expect you to say it back, I needed you to know." Beth reached up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "It does seem fast," she agreed softly. "But I'm falling in love with you too." The kiss that followed was different from their previous ones, deeper, more certain, filled with promise. As spring turned to summer, Beth and Connor's relationship continued to flourish. Connor began spending more time in Beth City as Oceanic Transit's expansion progressed, often working from her apartment when she had translation projects. They fell into an easy rhythm together, supporting each other's careers while carving out time to explore their relationship. "Have you ever been to Greece?" Connor asked one Sunday morning as they lingered over coffee on Beth's small balcony. Beth shook her head. "It's on my list, but I haven't made it there yet." "Why? I have some business in Athens next month. I was thinking you might want to come with me." "We could extend the trip, explore some of the islands afterward." Beth's eyes widened. "Are you serious?" "Absolutely. Your work is remote, right? You could bring your laptop, take care of any urgent projects, and we could have evenings and weekends together. Plus, I'd get to show off by having a beautiful woman who speaks multiple languages on my arm." Beth laughed, but her mind was already racing with possibilities. "That sounds amazing. Let me check my schedule and current projects." 2 days later, Beth confirmed she could make the trip work. Connor's face lit up with boyish excitement when she told him. Perfect. I'll have my assistant arrange everything. Is there any particular island you've always wanted to visit? Santorini, Beth answered without hesitation. Those white buildings against the blue sea, it looks like a dream. Santorini it is then, Connor promised. The Athens portion of their trip was a blend of work and pleasure. While Connor attended meetings during the day, Beth either worked on her translations or explored the ancient city. In the evenings, they discovered local restaurants, walked hand in hand through historic neighborhoods, and fell even deeper in love against the backdrop of one of the world's oldest cities. After a week in Athens, they flew to Santorini for what Connor had promised would be a completely work-free vacation. Their accommodation, a private villa overlooking the caldera, took Beth's breath away. Connor, this is too much, she whispered as they were shown to their terrace with its infinity pool and panoramic views. Nothing's too much for you, he replied simply, wrapping his arms around her from behind as they gazed out at the azure sea. They spent their days exploring the island, swimming in secluded coves, sampling local wines, and savoring the unhurried pace of island life. Beth had never felt so content, so present in each moment. On their final evening in Santorini, Connor suggested they watch the famous sunset from their private terrace rather than joining the crowds in Oya. Beth agreed, changing into a flowing white dress that Connor had bought for her in a local boutique. As the sky began its spectacular transformation from blue to a painter's palette of oranges, pinks, and purples, Connor poured them each a glass of champagne. To us, he said, raising his glass, and to the most magical 2 weeks of my life. Beth clinked her glass against his. To us, she echoed, feeling overwhelmed with happiness. As the sun dipped lower toward the horizon, Connor set down his glass and took both of Beth's hands in his. Beth Sullivan, he began, his voice suddenly thick with emotion, meeting you changed everything for me. Beth felt her heart begin to race as Connor dropped to one knee, still holding her hands. Before you, I was successful but incomplete. With you, I've discovered what it truly means to be rich. He released one of her hands to reach into his pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. You've taught me that the most valuable things in life can't be bought or sold, they can only be felt and shared. He opened the box to reveal a stunning diamond ring, its brilliance catching the last golden rays of the setting sun. I love you more than I ever thought possible. Will you marry me? Tears sprang to Beth's eyes as joy flooded through her. Yes, she whispered, then louder, yes, Connor, I'll marry you. As he slipped the ring onto her finger and rose to kiss her, Beth marveled at how a failed blind date had led her to this perfect moment with a man who saw her, truly saw her, and loved her for exactly who she was. Their wedding took place the following spring, a relatively small affair for a man of Connor's wealth and position. They exchanged vows in a historic garden overlooking the same harbor where they'd walked on their first date, surrounded by close friends and family. After a honeymoon that took them through Italy, France, and Spain, a trip that allowed Beth to showcase her language skills and cultural knowledge, they settled into married life with surprising ease. Connor had purchased a waterfront home that gave them space and privacy while remaining close to both their work. 6 months into their marriage, Beth received an offer to translate a major international maritime treaty, the kind of prestigious project that could elevate her career to new heights. The only catch, it would require extensive travel and long hours over a 3-month period. With some trepidation, she brought it up over dinner, half expecting Connor to point out the logistical challenges or suggest she consider something less demanding. Instead, he reached across the table to squeeze her hand, his face alight with pride. Beth, this is incredible. You have to take it. But the timing, the travel, we'll make it work, he said firmly. My company has offices in most of the cities you'd need to visit. I could rearrange my schedule to join you for parts of it. Beth felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. You'd do that, of course I would. Your success is as important to me as my own. We're partners, remember. That night, as they lay together in the quiet darkness of their bedroom, Beth reflected on how differently her life might have turned out if her blind date had actually shown up that night at the restaurant. She might never have sat next to Connor at that bar, never vented her frustrations to a stranger who turned out to be the love of her life. "What are you thinking about?" Connor murmured, his arm tightening around her. "Just how lucky I am that someone stood me up," Beth replied, snuggling closer to him. Connor chuckled, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "I'd say we're both pretty lucky. I almost didn't stop for a drink that night." Beth tilted her face up to his. "I guess some things are just meant to be." "I believe that," Connor said softly. "I believe we were meant to find each other." As she drifted towards sleep in the arms of the man she loved, Beth couldn't help but smile at the beautiful irony. Complaining to a stranger about a missed connection had led her to the most important connection of her life. 2 years later, as Beth held their newborn daughter in her arms with Connor beside her, their journey from chance meeting to family felt both miraculous and somehow inevitable, like the most perfect translation from possibility to reality, with nothing lost in between.